Hi, and welcome to number 1 in a short series introducing you to the Native American Style Flute. I say Native American Style Flute primarily because I myself have European ancestry. Even though I made this flute as a Native American flute, I myself am not Native American, so it's not a Native American flute, it's a Native American Style Flute. In this first video, we'll talk just a little bit about the flute, why it's so special. In subsequent videos, we'll get into some brief lessons and other information about how to get started. The wonderful thing about a Native American flute or a Native American style flute is its simplicity. It's little more than a tube with a few holes in it. The best thing about it is it doesn't require any prior musical knowledge or training. I have none myself, but I've learned how to play, and you can as well. Native American style flutes have a series of finger holes, and then how you cover and uncover these finger holes makes the various notes. The beauty of this flute is that it's tuned to what is called a pentatonic minor scale. I am not, as I say, a musician, so we won't go into anything like music theory, but what that means in a nutshell is that if you play the notes properly, you can play them in just about any order, and they will sound harmonious with each other. That's the beauty of the pentatonic minor scale. And so you can play them randomly and get something that sounds not only halfway decent, but downright pleasant. I'm going to grab another flute and we'll talk a little bit about how the flute actually functions. This was also made by yuccaflute.com. This one is made from a piece of agave stalk, and it's in the key of A. You'll notice that it's just a little bit smaller than the first one that I started with, smaller in length and also in diameter. This one is an F sharp, and this one is an A. Now, how they work. It's basically just a long tube. It's almost hollow, but not completely. The bulk of it is hollow from what the foot or the end of the bore up to what some people call a plug, which is inside the flute, right at about this location. Underneath what is called the block, or the bird, or sometimes the fetish, are a couple of holes. When you blow into this end of the flute, the mouthpiece, air passes through a narrow chamber, maybe about this long, and then it expands into an internal chamber in this area that is called the slow air chamber. And at the south end, or the foot end of the slow air chamber, is a hole. It's called the slow air chamber exit hole. And as you blow into the flute, air travels through the slow air chamber, comes up out of the flute through this hole, and then the bottom of the block, or the bird, simply directs the air, your breath, to blow forward and then to interact with what's called the splitting edge on the true sound hole. And that wind, or your breath, then is forced into the proper direction. It hits that the front edge, or the south edge of the true sound hole, causing some of the air to go into the bore of the flute and some of the air to go above the flute. That's why it's called a splitting edge. It splits the air into two. And that causes a vibration, and that vibration in turn is the sound. Contrary to popular belief, the sound does not come out of the end of the flute. It is actually produced here at the sound hole, sometimes called the fipple, and the sound comes from there. Shorter flutes tend to be higher in pitch. Longer flutes tend to be lower in pitch. Same thing is also true about the dimensions of the bore. Basically, a larger internal cavity makes a deeper flute. And so the way that the holes work, and I've loosened this so I can't play it at the moment, the way the holes work is by effectively shortening the sound chamber. So if I cover all of the holes, or if it had no holes, then the sound wave is going to bounce around inside the entire length of the flute and escape here at the end, and that causes it to have what's called the fundamental note, in this case an F sharp. However, if I uncover a hole, then as that sound wave is moving through the flute body, it would actually escape through this hole. And this prevents those vibrating waves from traveling the rest of the distance of the bore of the flute. This essentially shortens the flute to the bottommost hole that is uncovered. And in this case, it makes a different note, a higher note. And if you were to uncover all of the holes, then essentially the length of the flute, acoustically speaking, is just this. So it would be from that splitting edge down to the first uncovered hole. This is it's typically not played with all 6 uncovered, so it might not be a pleasant tone, but we'll try it. Pleasant enough, but very high. So that's the way they work. It is basically a tube. There's a divider inside the flute, right about here. People sometimes call it a plug, that simply separates this chamber from the sound chamber. There's a hole to breathe into or to blow lightly into on this end. The air travels through the breath hole into the slow air chamber, up the slow air chamber's exit hole, under the block or fetish, across the splitting edge of the true sound hole, and then travels through the bore, and that's what makes the sound.